Hello students, so this discussion is about the endocrine system. Now, along with the nervous system, the endocrine system coordinates and directs the activity of the body cells. Please remember that this is the second control system of the body. Pero yung speed of control ng dalawang regulating systems na yan ay magkaiba. Yung nervous system, it's actually built for speed. Gumagamit siya ng nerve impulses para yung muscles and glands magkaroon ng action. And nagkakaroon ng rapid adjustments para mag-respond doon sa mga changes both in and out of our body. In contrast, ang endocrine system, they act more slowly. It uses chemical messengers na ang tawag natin ay hormones. What are hormones? These are substances that are excreted by the endocrine cells into the ECF, and they regulate the metabolic activity of other cells in the body. So, ang mga endocrine glands, nagsisecrete sila ng hormones. At lahat ng hormones, dinidiretso nila ang secretion into the blood, particularly doon sa plasma. Now, nagta-travel siya all throughout the body and they alter now the activity of target cells. Bakit natin sinabing target cells? Kasi unlike the nervous system, they can control all functions. Pero ang hormones, they only choose some organs to control. At ang tawag natin doon, target cells or target organs. Although hormones have widespread effects, yung major processes niya na kokontrol ay ang mga ito. First is reproduction, growth and development, mobilizing body defenses against stressors, maintains electrolyte, water, and nutrient balance of the body, and they regulate metabolism and energy. Kaya pag nagkakaroon ng problema sa hormones, basically, ito din yung mga nagiging problem or homeostatic imbalances na meron ng isang tao. What now are the mechanisms of hormone action? A hormone affects only certain tissue cells or organs. As mentioned a while ago, ang kaya niyang aksyonan, ang kaya niyang utusan ay mga target cells or target organs. Now, for a target cell to respond to a hormone, dumidikit siya dun sa protein receptors. Nasaan ang mga protein receptors? It's either it's inside the cell or nandun siya sa cell membrane. So again, recall the basic parts of a cell membrane, nucleus, cytoplasm. Now, pag nag-attach na yung hormone na yon dun sa protein receptor ng kanyang target cell, the hormone now will alter the cellular activity. What will the hormone do? It will either increase or decrease the metabolic process na ginagawa ng cell. So, yun yung nakokontrol na niya. Looking at this photo, letter A talks about direct gene activation. Letter B talks about the second messenger system. Now, ito yung mechanism ng hormone action. As mentioned earlier, either yung protein receptor ay nasa loob ng cell or yung protein receptor ay nasa cell membrane. So, in the first photo, letter A, that's actually a lipid-soluble mechanism of hormone action. I'll give you an example, estrogen. So sa photo makikita nyo, yung color violet, yan yung protein receptor. And the protein receptor is inside the cell. If the protein receptor is inside the cell, either nasa nucleus or cytoplasm siya. And because these are lipid solubles, and yung cell membrane ay lipid soluble, then madaling nakaka-diffuse, diretso yung steroid o yung estrogen inside the plasma membrane, and then nakakarating agad siya dun sa target cell, na-activate niya. So, dire-diretso. For example, no, estrogen nga. So, ang estrogen ay lipid soluble, it's a steroid, and because yung cell membrane ay lipid soluble, dire-diretso siyang nakakapasok sa loob, whether in the cytoplasm or in the nucleus. Kaya siya direct gene activation. In the second photo is the second messenger system. So, nasaan yung protein receptor? It's in the cell membrane. Ang mga second messenger system ay ang mga hormones na water-soluble. And one example is insulin. So, in the photo, you see na yung color violet, nasa cell membrane lang siya ng cell. If insulin is a water-soluble hormone, and the cell membrane is lipid-soluble, hindi siya dire-diretsyong makakapasok sa loob. Therefore, kailangan niya na magkaroon ng enzyme or carrier. At itong enzyme or carrier na to, yan yung mag-activate sa cell response para makapasok and ma-actionan yung target cell or target organ. What are the enzymes that can be used? It could be CAMP. It's a cyclic adenosine monophosphate. Pwede ring CGMP, cyclic guanosine monophosphate. Pwede ring calcium ions, but usually it's the CAMP. And it's the second messenger system. Here are the examples of the hormones which follow the direct gene activation in the second messenger system. So, yung nabanggit kong example kanina, pag direct gene activation, lipid-soluble ang hormones na to. Estrogen is an example. It's a steroid. Ibig sabihin, kung lipid-soluble yung hormone, madali siyang na makakapasok sa loob ng cell. Kasi lipid-soluble ang cell membrane ng cell. It can easily pass through. And pwede niyang mahanap doon yung protein receptor either in the nucleus or in the cytoplasm, mag-a-attach doon yung hormone and then ma-activate yung cell. Pero pag second messenger system, water-soluble ang hormones na ito. Example is insulin. It's a polypeptide. At dahil water-soluble ang mga hormones na to, hindi siya ganon kadaling makakapasok ng cell membrane nung cell because cell membranes are made up of fats. So, kailangan niya ng enzymes to carry. Example is a CAMP or CAMP. So, yun yung mag-activate, mag-attach yung hormone doon sa a protein receptor na nasa cell membrane and then the carrier is needed or the enzyme is needed. Hormones have different characteristics also. It could be diurnal, it could be pulsatile and cyclic, or it could be variable. Pag sinabing diurnal, yung level ng hormone sa katawan changes in 24 hours. Cortisol is a hormone that is usually high when we wake up in the morning. And then at the end of the day, ang cortisol nagdi-decrease. Pag sinabi namang pulsatile and cyclic, usually nag-change ang level niya on a monthly basis. A very good example is estrogen, especially in women. Kaya ang mga babae, monthly yung menstrual cycle. And lastly, variable. When we say variable, the level of hormones change depending on other factors. Parathyroid hormone levels change depending on the calcium level in the blood. This now is a discussion of how endocrine glands are being stimulated to secrete hormones. Pag sinabing hormonal stimuli, nagsisecrete ng hormone yung endocrine gland kasi may hormone din na nagsistimulate sa kanila. For example is hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is an endocrine gland. it stimulates another endocrine gland, and that's the pituitary gland. Usually, this is in rhythmic pattern. Kapag naman humoral stimuli, depende yung level ng hormone release sa iba-ibang level ng ions or nutrients in the body. Kanina, nabigay kong example yung parathyroid hormone or PTH or sometimes parathormone. Depende ang level ng ang release ng parathormone sa level ng calcium sa katawan. Neural stimuli. Pag sinabing neural stimuli, ang pag-secrete ng hormone ng endocrine gland ay depende sa control ng nervous system through the nerve fibers. So, yung target cell nagre-respond again because of the order of the nervous system. For example, is when the adrenal medulla releases its hormones, epi and norepi, or adrenaline and noradrenaline. This is sympathetic nervous system stimulation during times of stress. This is again a photo showing how some endocrine glands secrete hormones either by hormonal stimuli, which is secreted because a hormone stimulates them. Humoral stimuli is when hormones are secreted because of some ions in the blood, and neural stimuli when the organs secrete the glands or the glands secrete the hormones because of nervous system stimulation. The feedback mechanism is also an important concept when we talk about control of hormone release. We have the negative feedback and the positive feedback. When we talk about negative feedback, a hormone is stimulated na mag-secrete kasi nakikita ng ating katawan na mababa siya. So when the body senses that the hormones are low, therefore it is stimulated na ma-release siya. One example again is the menstrual cycle. Because when the body senses that the hormones are low, particularly estrogen and progesterone, magsa-start ang menstrual cycle para mag-increase ang hormones ng babae. Most of the organs in the body follow the feedback mechanism, or most of the control of hormone release in the body follow the feedback mechanism, negative feedback. Yung positive feedback mechanism naman, there's a continuous secretion of hormones as the body senses that it is being secreted already. Another example naman ito is when a woman is giving birth. Kailangan ng mataas na oxytocin so that the uterus is contracted. And as the body senses that oxytocin is secreted during delivery, tuloy-tuloy ang kanyang pag-secrete. Ito kailangan ng external brake because the hormone should be stopped. Yung release ng hormone should be stopped at one point. And in the case of vaginal birth, kapag nanganak na yung babae, it will stop. Here now are the different endocrine glands that we will be discussing. Compared to other organs of the body, yung organs ng endocrine system are small. They also lack the structural or anatomical continuity typical of most organ systems. Kasi, di ba, yung mga system, usually, they are in one tract. Tuloy-tuloy at magkakadikit yung organs nila. Pero dito, sa endocrine system, the endocrine glands are actually bits and pieces of endocrine tissue tucked away in separate regions of the body. Although usually, nasa midline siya ng katawan. Functionally, the endocrine organs are very impressive kahit na maliliit sila. And very important ang kanilang role sa pag-maintain ng ating body homeostasis. And because of this function, they are actually true giants. Ngayon, meron tayong naririnig na exocrine glands. Exocrine glands are different from endocrine glands in such a way na pag sinabing endocrine glands, isa lang ang sinisekret nila, hormones. And where do they secrete it? Into the blood. Pero pag exocrine glands, may sinisekret din. But whatever they secrete, they release it at the body surface or into body cavities through ducts. Ibig sabihin, yung exocrine glands may exit. Unlike endocrine glands, yung sinisekret nila diretso lang sa blood. So let us discuss now one by one each of the endocrine glands. First endocrine gland is the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus, which is a part of the nervous system, is also recognized as a major endocrine organ. Why? Because it produces several hormones. Mostly, kinokontrol niya ang anterior pituitary gland. Nagsisekret siya ng mga releasing and inhibiting hormones. The second endocrine gland is the pituitary gland. It's a very small gland, approximately the size of a pea. It is near the hypothalamus of the brain. Now, derived siya from the epithelium of the oral cavity and a neural tissue projection of the hypothalamus. The pituitary gland, even if it is so small, meron siyang two functional lobes. The anterior pituitary gland, sometimes called adenohypophysis, and posterior pituitary gland, sometimes called neurohypophysis. Let us first discuss the hormones of the anterior pituitary gland. So here you can see the growth hormone, prolactin, FSH and LH, which are also called as gonadotropins, TH, thyrotropic hormone, or sometimes TSH for thyroid stimulating hormone, and ACTH, the adrenal corticotropic hormone. Now, remember that FSH, LH, TSH, and ACTH are all tropic hormones. When we say tropic hormones, ang mga hormones na ito, yung target organs niya are also endocrine glands. Pero yung growth hormone and prolactin, non-endocrine yung structures na target organ nila. So let us first go to the growth hormone or GH. Ang target organ ng growth hormone ay ang bones and muscles. So basically, it allows bone elongation, growth, and development. If there is hyposecretion of growth hormone during birth, ito yung dwarfism. Pag naman may hypersecretion of growth hormone during birth or childhood, gigantism. But when growth hormone is excess in secretion during adulthood, ito yung tinatawag na acromegaly. This is a hypersecretion of growth hormone, especially when the long bone growth has been achieved already. Yung may mga problems ng hyposecretion or hypersecretion sa growth hormone are usually problems associated with anterior pituitary compression. So either may naipit na anterior pituitary part because of a tumor. Okay? Next is prolactin. Prolactin's target organ is the mammary glands or the breast. After childbirth, it stimulates and maintains milk production by the mother's breasts. Its function in men is not known. The third hormones are the gonadotropins, FSH and LH. Ngayon, ano ang kanyang mga target organs or target glands? Sa lalaki, testes. Sa babae, ovaries. So first, anong ginagawa muna ng FSH sa babae? FSH matures the egg. This now will increase estrogen. And then, ano naman ang ginagawa ng FSH sa lalaki? Ang FSH naman ang nagpapamature ng sperm. What about the LH? The LH in females trigger ovulation and it thickens endometrium. So may dalawa siyang function sa babae. Again, LH in females trigger ovulation and thickens endometrium. And sa lalaki, anong ginagawa ng LH? It stimulates testosterone production. Now, if there is hyposecretion of either FSH or LH, it can actually lead to sterility. Ibig sabihin, there is inability of either the male or the female to reproduce. If there is hypersecretion naman, it does not appear to cause problems. Next is the TH or the TSH. Ini-influence niya naman ang growth and activity of the thyroid gland. And lastly, yung ACTH, it regulates the activity of the adrenal cortex ng adrenal gland. So again, yung FSH, LH, TSH, and ACTH, lahat ng sinestimulate ng mga hormones nila ay mga endocrine glands din. That's why they are called the tropic hormones. Next is the posterior pituitary gland. Dalawa lang ang hormones na sinesecrete niya. It's the antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin. Ano ang target organ ng antidiuretic hormone? It's the kidneys. It allows the inhibition of urine production. Diuresis means urine production. So if it is anti, it means it inhibits urine production. Therefore, the kidneys reabsorbs more water. So pag marami ang tubig na nare-reabsorb kasi hindi nga nagpo-produce ng maraming urine, dumadami ang blood volume. At pag dumami ang blood volume, nagkakaroon ng pagsikip ng mga blood vessels. So there is constriction of arterioles. And when that happens, it may increase the blood pressure. That's why sometimes ADH is also called vasopressin, which means it compresses the blood vessels. That's why vasopressin. Now, alcohol inhibits ADH. So if you drink alcohol, nagkakaroon ng large amounts of urine production. There is a homeostatic imbalance na nagkakaroon ng hyposecretion of ADH. And we call that diabetes insipidus. Diabetes insipidus leads to excessive urine output. The second hormone is the oxytocin. Ang kanyang target organ naman is the uterus and the breasts. What about the uterus? It allows uterine contraction during sexual relations, during birth, and during breastfeeding. What about the breast? Siya naman ay nagkukos ng milk ejection. Especially, of course, when there is breastfeeding. Ito yung tinatawag na let-down reflex. Next are the thyroid and the parathyroid glands. The thyroid gland is located in the neck. It's the base of the throat, just below the cricoid cartilage, inferior sa Adam's apple. So, nung embryonic development, galing actually siya sa mucosa ng digestive tract, together with the thymus and the pancreas. It's H-shaped. It's a large gland and it consists of two lobes. Yung central mass na nagko-connect sa kanila, you call that isthmus. Internally, the thyroid gland is composed of hollow structures which are follicles. It's a sticky colloidal material. What are the hormones of the thyroid gland? We have thyroxine, T4, triiodothyronine, T3, and thyrocalcitonin. Let us first discuss T4 and T3. T4 is thyronine. Siya ang major hormone na sinisecrete ng thyroid follicles. Bakit T4? Because may 4 na iodine-bound atoms ang nagko-combine ng 2 tyrosine amino acids. Ano naman yung triiodothyronine? It's more potent than tyrosine. Ito naman, T3 siya kasi may 3 iodine atoms na nagli-link dun sa 2 tyrosine. Without iodine, therefore, functional thyroid hormones cannot be made because you cannot combine 2 tyrosine kung wala yung mga iodine. So, kung 3 iodine nga, triiodothyronine, that's why T3. Kung 4 na iodine, we have the T4. The source of iodine is our diet, and foods richest in iodine are actually seafoods, for one. Ano ngayon ang purpose ng thyroid hormones? T4 and T3. It regulates growth and development, it's for metabolism of nutrients, reproduction, and even resistance to infection. If there are problems of the thyroid hormone, there could be goiter. Nag-e-enlarge yung thyroid gland, especially if you lack iodine, because the thyroid gland compensates sa pagsikret pa rin ng hormone despite the lack of iodine. Hypothyroidism in childhood is cretinism. This can actually lead to mental retardation. Hypothyroidism naman sa adults is mixed edema, lalo na kung kulang ka sa iodine content in your diet. Graves' disease is hyperthyroidism. Ito naman usually ang cause, baka merong mass or tumor within the thyroid gland. And exophthalmos is actually a manifestation kung saan we can see the bulging and protrusion of the eyes of someone with a problem of the thyroid gland. The other hormone of the thyroid hormones or the thyroid gland is thyrocalcitonin, which has a very different function with that of T4 and T3. Ang thyrocalcitonin nagdi-decrease ng blood calcium. How does the thyrocalcitonin do that? They cause calcium to be deposited in the bones. It's made by the parafollicular cells in connective tissues between the follicles. Very opposite ang action ng thyrocalcitonin sa parathormone, which is now the hormone naman of the parathyroid gland. Pero minor lang ang effect niya with that of parathormone. In the blood kasi, parathormone increases calcium, while thyrocalcitonin decreases calcium. So this is parathyroid hormone. So, ito nga yung 4 small glands malapit doon sa thyroid gland. Ang sinisikret niya, PTH, parathyroid hormone, or parathormone. As mentioned a while ago, parathormone controls calcium metabolism by increasing calcium level. It's the major hormone which controls calcium in the blood. How does it increase calcium level in the blood? Because it increases resorption of bone. Kaya nagkakaroon ng normal serum calcium level. Pero bukod sa bone, it also stimulates kidneys and intestines to absorb more calcium. Again, parathormone is hypercalcemic. Nag-i-increase siya ng calcium sa blood. But thyrocalcitonin is hypocalcemic. Nagdi-decrease naman siya ng calcium sa blood. Parathormone is secreted by the parathyroid gland. Thyrocalcitonin is secreted by the thyroid gland. Now, if you have hypoparathyroidism, which means you have inefficient or inadequate secretion of parathormone, muscles go into an uncontrollable spasms or tetany. Dito nagkakaroon ng extremely irritable and overactive neurons. They deliver impulses to the muscles so rapidly, kaya pwedeng magkaroon ng tetany, and that is fatal. Ang hyperparathyroidism naman can cause bone destruction. Why? Because the bones become very fragile and spontaneous fractures begin to occur. So again, kapag meron kang hypoparathyroidism, bumababa yung calcium. Kapag naman meron kang hyperparathyroidism, tumataas yung calcium. The next are the adrenal glands. These are two glands which are bean-shaped. They are over the top of the kidneys. Dalawa yung structures na meron sa adrenal glands. The adrenal medulla, it's the inner core of neural tissue, and the adrenal cortex, it's the outer glandular shell. Again, although each adrenal gland looks like a single organ, it is structurally and functionally two endocrine organs in one, the medulla and the cortex. Both contribute to survival and well-being, but only the cortex is very essential for life. First, the adrenal medulla is a part of the sympathetic nervous system fight or flight response. As mentioned earlier, this follows the neural stimuli. Ang sinisecrete ng medulla, epinephrine and norepinephrine. Collectively, they are called catecholamines. What is its significance? It prepares an individual to meet and deal with threat and danger during the alarm stage of stress response. Pag ang isang tao na sa stress, merong 3 stages. The alarm stage is the first one, the resistance stage is the second one, and the exhaustion is the last phase. Now, pag tayo na sa stress, nasusunog ang bahay mo, that's the alarm stage because epi and norepi is being secreted. That's why you can carry your refrigerator alone kapag nandun ka sa alarm stage ng stress. But if, let's say for example, you are just moving in, you yourself cannot carry the refrigerator. But with the alarm stage, kaya mo siyang buhatin kasi nandoon yung adrenaline rush, noradrenaline rush coming from the increased catecholamines in your blood. What happens when there is increase epi and norepi? Epi acts on the liver to convert glycogen into glucose, and glucose is the primary source of heat or energy. That's why there is gained strength during the alarm stage of the stress response. It acts on the heart to increase cardiac output, and norepi produces extensive vascular constriction, and there's a marked rise in blood pressure. Now, if there is a damage or destruction sa medulla, it really has no major effects as long as the sympathetic nervous system neurons continue to function normally. However, pag may hypersecretion ang catecholamines, it can lead to symptoms like rapid heartbeat, high blood pressure, and there's also a tendency to perspire and be very irritable. Usually, surgical removal ng catecholamine secreting cells ang nagko-correct sa condition na yon. The other structure in the adrenal gland is the adrenal cortex, which is very essential for survival because loss of adrenocortical hormones can lead to death. The hormones secreted by the adrenal cortex are actually synthesized from cholesterol. And these are our steroid hormones, or the corticosteroids. What are those three? We have mineralocorticoids, glucocorticoids, and the sex hormones. Ang mineralocorticoid, aldosterone, ang major example niyan. Ang glucocorticoid, we have cortisol and cortisone. At yung sex hormones, we have the androgen and estrogen. First is mineralocorticoid. Again, aldosterone is an example. It regulates minerals from the name itself. It promotes sodium retention and potassium excretion. It also regulates water. That's why aldosterone is very important for fluid and electrolyte balance of the body. Now, renin is actually an enzyme produced by the kidneys. It's a potent stimulator of aldosterone release at tumutulong to sa pag-sustain ng blood pressure. Another hormone produced by the heart is the atrial natriuretic peptide. Ito naman, kabaliktaran ng renin, it prevents aldosterone release. This physiologic activity naman helps sustain normal cardiac output. When you say cardiac output, it's the amount of oxygenated blood that exits the aorta for 1 minute. Glucocorticoids are cortisol and cortisone. Cortisol is the major glucocorticoid. Recalling the discussion a while ago, nare-release ang cortisol because ACTH is there. And ACTH stimulates cortisol release coming from the anterior pituitary gland. What are the effects of cortisol in the body? Glucose metabolism is very important. It's actually a hyperglycemic hormone. Nag-i-increase siya ng glucose. And we all know that glucose is the primary source of heat and energy in our body. Another is protein and fat metabolism. It promotes normal cell metabolism. And when we talk about metabolism, we are dealing with how the cells function in the body, the chemical activities of our cells. Third, like mineralocorticoids, they also help maintain fluid and electrolyte balance. Fourth, it controls inflammation because it helps reduce edema. It also reduces pain because it inhibits prostaglandins. And lastly, resist stressors. It operates on the resistance stage of stress response. Recalling a while ago the stages of stress, first stage is alarm. It's triggered by catecholamines of medulla. Pero kailangan may mag-control doon. Dahil kapag nagtuloy-tuloy ang release ng catecholamines, it's norepi and epi. No, there is extensive vasoconstriction, there is increased blood pressure. That's why cortisol controls it. Kaya nga resistance stage, it's very, very important para hindi na siya mag-lead sa exhaustion. Third are the sex hormones androgen and estrogen. The adrenal cortex secrete few amounts of both male, which is androgen, and female, estrogen, hormones, compared with the large amounts of sex hormones secreted by the gonads. When we say gonads, ito yung ovary sa babae at testes sa lalaki. Of course, the ovary secretes so many estrogen. The testes secretes so many androgen. But, comparing to the adrenal cortex, maliit lang yung sinisekrete nila na androgen and estrogen. The bulk of the sex hormones produced by the innermost cortex layer are androgens, no? But some are estrogens. So, mas maraming androgen kesa estrogen na sinesekrete itong adrenal cortex. So if you are gonna ask, meron bang estrogen ang lalaki? Meron. But there is very minute amounts. Saan siya galing? Sa adrenal cortex ng lalaki. Another question, may androgen ba ang babae? Meron din. But very minute. Saan galing yon? Doon din sa adrenal cortex ng babae. Homeostatic imbalances. Addison's disease is hyposecretion of cortisol. Cushing's syndrome is hyperactivity of cortisol. Hyperaldosteronism is hyperactivity of aldosterone. And masculinization is hypersecretion of sex hormones. And again, dahil nga mas marami ang androgen kesa estrogen sa adrenal cortex, kapag merong hypersecretion ng sex hormones, it's not really that evident in a male na mamask siya. But if it's the female, very obvious yung masculinization. Now, these homeostatic imbalances will be further discussed in your higher years. You do not need to know the specifics of the disease. What's important is, ano siya when it comes to the hormones of the adrenal gland, whether it's hyposecretion or hypersecretion. The fifth endocrine gland is the pancreas. It's a large fish-shaped organ that lies behind the stomach, and the pancreas both has exocrine and endocrine functions. Yung exocrine functions ng pancreas, ito yung digestive enzymes. Ang sinesecrete niya, trypsin, lipase, amylase, which we will further discuss sa gastrointestinal system. Pero pag endocrine functions, again, anong sinesecrete niya? Hormones. Together with the thyroid and the thymus, so galing din siya sa outpocketings ng mucosa ng digestive tract noong intrauterine life. The endocrine functions of the pancreas are carried out by the islets of Langerhans, na merong alpha, beta, and delta cells. There are several hormones secreted by the pancreas, that's insulin, glucagon, somatostatin, and gastrin. But the most common is insulin and glucagon. Insulin is secreted by the beta cells, glucagon, alpha cells, somatostatin, delta, and gastrin, also delta cells. Insulin helps control fat and protein metabolism. A high level of glucose in the blood stimulates the release of insulin. It is absolutely necessary for the use of glucose by the body cells. Without it, essentially no glucose can get into the cells to be used. So anong sabi natin ulit sa glucose? Glucose is the primary source of energy. So dapat yung glucose makapasok sa loob ng cell. Pero hindi papasok basta-basta ang glucose sa loob ng cell. Kailangan merong insulin. Insulin is like the door of the cell so that glucose can enter. So without without insulin, nandyan lang yung glucose sa blood. It cannot enter the cell. Therefore, insulin allows entrance of glucose into the cell. That's why it's a powerful hypoglycemic agent. When you say hypoglycemic, bumababa yung glucose level sa blood kasi pinapapasok nga niya sa loob ng cell. If a person now has problems with insulin secretion, it's probable that he or she has diabetes mellitus. Please take note, this is different from diabetes insipidus. Diabetes insipidus is an antidiuretic hormone problem, but diabetes mellitus is an insulin problem. Now, if a person has lack of insulin, meaning no insulin secretion of the pancreas at all. It's usually type 1, juvenile or insulin-dependent diabetes mellitus. Bata pa lang, gano'n na siya. These people need insulin injection. But if a person's pancreas secretes inadequate or little insulin, meaning may insulin pa rin, pero hindi ganon kadami, usually yun yung type 2 diabetes mellitus, adult onset, or non-insulin dependent diabetes mellitus. Here, oral hypoglycemics can be given, not necessarily insulin injection. Pwede yung mga oral drugs just to increase the sensitivity of the target tissues to insulin. Now, ano ba yung cardinal signs ng diabetes mellitus? Polyuria is excessive urination, polydipsia, excessive thirst, and polyphagia, hunger. Bakit ihi ng ihi ang taong may diabetes? Kasi ayaw pumasok nung glucose sa loob ng cell. Kasi wala kang insulin eh. Therefore, glucose is high in the blood. Kaya may hyperglycemia. And glucose will find its way out of the body through the urine. Bakit naman uhaw lagi? Bakit laging gutom? Again, kung walang insulin, ayaw pumasok ng glucose sa loob ng cell. And glucose is the primary source of energy. So kung walang pumapasok na source of energy, para kang laging nauuhaw, para kang laging nagugutom. That's why these are the cardinal signs of diabetes mellitus. Again, because cells do not have access to glucose, saan siya kumukuha ngayon ng source of energy? Pwedeng gamitin ng katawan yung fats and proteins. Now, fats and proteins are broken down and used to meet the energy requirement of the body. Kasi nga wala na yung glucose, yung carbohydrate na glucose, which is the primary source of energy. First problem now is because of acidosis and ketosis. So, gagamitin ang fats. Pag ginamit ang fats, breakdown product niya, fatty acids. So, nagkakaroon ng acidosis. When large amounts of fats instead of sugars are used for energy, nagiging acidic yung blood. Yung ketones, ito yung intermediate products ng fat breakdown. And ketones appear in the blood. Ito yung type ng acidosis referred to as ketosis. If this will not be corrected, coma and death can result. Pangalawa, bukod sa fats, pwedeng gamitin ang proteins kasi nga wala nang source of energy, hindi makapasok ang glucose. Loss of body proteins leads to a decreased ability to fight infections. Kaya may decreased immune system. That's why diabetics must maintain good hygiene and care for even small cuts and bruises. Kaya di ba minsan kapag nagkakasugat ang may diabetes, ang tagal gumagaling. Bakit? If the diabetes is uncontrolled, ginagamit na rin niya yung protein for a primary source of energy. And protein is very important for tissue healing. So, hindi na agad-agad napapagaling ng protein ang sugat kasi nagagamit na siya to meet the energy requirements of the body. The second hormone of the pancreas is glucagon. Glucagon acts as an antagonist of insulin. That is, it helps to regulate the blood glucose level, but in a way opposite to that of insulin. Sa insulin, hypoglycemic agent siya. Kasi pinapapasok niya yung glucose sa loob ng cell. Kaya bumababa ang glucose sa blood. Pero ang glucagon nagpapataas ng glucose sa blood because it promotes conversion of glycogen within the liver to become glucose. So, ang target organ ng glucagon is the liver. In our liver, we store glycogen. And glycogen is a precursor of glucose. There is no important disorder that usually results from hyposecretion or hypersecretion of glucagon. Minor hormones, somatostatin, it decreases secretion of insulin, glucagon, growth hormone, gastrin, and secretin. So, siya ay mga helper cells lang, but no major function. Another is gastrin. It's primarily used in metabolism of food, specifically for digestion. Another endocrine gland is the pineal gland. It's a small cone-shaped gland that hangs from the roof of the third ventricle of the brain. Developed siya entirely from neural tissue. Only the hormone melatonin appears to be secreted by this gland in substantial amounts. Ano ba ang functions ng melatonin? First is sleep pattern. So, kailan ba tayo inaantok? Usually sa gabi. Ibig sabihin, tumataas yung level ng melatonin at night. It's also helpful in mating behavior and rhythms, and melatonin is also believed to inhibit the reproductive system before adult body size is reached. Again, ang level ng melatonin, it rises and it falls during the course of the day and the night. And madalas, ang peak level niya sa gabi, ang lowest level niya occurs during the daylight, around noontime. Thymus gland is another endocrine gland located in the upper thorax, posterior ng sternum. Kamukha ng thyroid and pancreas, galing din siya sa mucosa ng digestive tract ng embryonic development. They are large in infants and children, and they decrease by adulthood. By old age, composed mostly na lang siya of fibrous connective tissue and fat. Now, what is the known hormone secreted by the thymus gland? It's thymosin. Ang thymosin appears to be essential for normal development of a special group of WBCs and the immune response. We will further discuss the functions of thymosin when we reach the discussion about blood. The last of the major endocrine glands are the gonads. The female and male gonads produce sex cells. So, ang sex cells, egg cell sa babae, sperm cell sa lalaki, but these are exocrine functions. Because yung egg cell tsaka yung sperm cell na ilalabas siya through a duct, may exit siya sa katawan ng tao. Ang gonads ng lalaki, testes. Ang gonads ng babae, ovaries. So again, ang gonads nagpo-produce ng sex cell, pero exocrine function siya. Ano ang endocrine function niya? They produce sex hormones. Kapareho ng pinoproduce ng adrenal cortex. Yun nga lang, the major difference is the amount of production. Yung source, magkaiba din, syempre. The adrenal cortex secretes little androgen and estrogen, mas maraming androgen, pero incomparable sa amounts na kayang isecrete ng ovary at ng testes. First are the ovaries. It's a paired almond-shaped gonad located in the pelvic cavity. Pinoproduce niya ang sex cells as an exocrine function, ova or the egg cells. Now, remember that egg cells are produced and completed intrauterine life. Lahat ng babae, nasa loob pa lang ng uterus ng mga mami nila yung baby girl. Buo na yung egg cells. but those are all immature egg cells. No more is produced after birth. Nagmamature na lang siya at puberty, pero nauubos lahat siya at menopause. Ano ngayon yung hormones as an endocrine function ng ovaries? Yun yung estrogen at progesterone. Estrogen is responsible for primary and secondary sex characteristics. Ano yung primary characteristics? It's the growth and maturation of the reproductive organs. Pag secondary sex characteristics naman, ito yung physical body changes. Usually, this happens at puberty. Ilang taon ba ang puberty? Usually between 12 to 13 years old. Nagkakaroon ng menarche or first menstruation. What about progesterone? Progesterone, during menstrual cycle, they act with estrogen. During pregnancy naman, they prepare the breast for lactation and quiets the muscles of the uterus. Ang uterus may muscle. If it's a muscle, it contracts. But that uterus should not contract during pregnancy. Otherwise, the pregnancy will not be successful kasi nandoon pa sa loob yung immature baby. Kailangan mag-contract siya during birth. So, during pregnancy, pinapaquiet ng progesterone yung muscles ng uterus. The ovaries are stimulated to release estrogen and progesterone in a cyclic way. Again, by the anterior pituitary glands. We will give more detail on this feedback cycle, on the structure, the function, and the control of the ovary when we discuss the reproductive system. During late middle age, nagde-decline ang efficiency ng ovary. It causes menopause. This is where reproductive organs atrophies and the ability to bear children ends. As mentioned a while ago, I said ang babae buo at kumpleto na yung egg cells niya intrauterine life pa lang. But all of these are immature. Pag pinanganak na yung batang babae, yun na yung dami ng egg cell niya, nagmamature na lang ng puberty. Pero unti-unti siyang nauubos hanggang maubos na siya at all ng menopause. Menopause is between 40 to 55 years old. Average age, 51. Now, if menopause happens, of course, hormones also decline. Pag nagkaroon ng deficiency ng estrogen, it can cause many things to a woman's body. Arteriosclerosis, ito yung hardening ng mga blood vessels. Osteoporosis, ito yung pag-lessen ng bone mass. Decreased skin elasticity, and also yung mga hot flushes, nagiging mainitin ng ulo nila. They get easily tired. They have mood changes. On the other hand, ang testes naman are the gonads of the males. Paired, oval shape, suspended in a sac inside the scrotum outside the pelvic cavity. Ang pinoproduce niya, again, male sex cells pero exocrine function siya. Ang sperm cells, unlike the egg cells, napoproduce lang from puberty. Unlike yung egg cells, intrauterine life, ando na siya, pero immature. Ang sperm cells napoproduce puberty. Nagmamature, puberty din. Pero nauubos ba siya? Hindi. Sperm cells are produced consistently from puberty to lifetime. In males, ibang-iba. Because egg cells are produced intrauterine, matures in cyclic pattern until it stops at menopause. Hormones, as an endocrine function ng testes, are androgens or testosterone. What are the functions of the androgen at puberty? Again, primary and secondary sex characteristics. So, yung reproductive organs ng lalaki nag-grow at nagmamature. Yung secondary sex characteristics naman, ito yung physical body changes na nararanasan at puberty. In adults, there is continuous sperm production. Besides the major endocrine organs, there are pockets of hormone-producing cells found in other organs of the body, such as small intestine, the stomach, the kidneys, the heart. So ito, meron din silang mga maliliit na sinisikret na hormones. Renin was mentioned a while ago, hormone secreted by kidneys, and ANP, hormone secreted by the heart. But here, we will give focus on the placenta. The placenta is a remarkable organ formed temporarily in the uterus of a pregnant woman. In addition to its role as respiratory, excretory, and nutrition sa fetus, meron din siyang endocrine function sa fetus. They help maintain pregnancy and pave the way for a successful delivery. So ano yung mga sinisikret na hormones ng placenta? One is the HCG, Human Chorionic Gonadotropin. Pagbuntis ang babae, similar to LH, it stimulates ovaries to continue producing estrogen and progesterone. Again, para yung lining ng uterus hindi mag-slough off. Kasi may nakatanim doon. And yun yung baby. So, hindi siya pwedeng mag-slough off. Increased hormones during pregnancy means the pregnancy will be successful. Kaya yung ovary, pagbuntis ang babae, mataas ang estrogen at progesterone. Tinutulungan pa siya ng placenta sa pagpapataas ng hormones na yan. In the 3rd month, it assumes the job of producing estrogen and progesterone hormones. Second is the human placental lactogen, HPL, or sometimes called somatomamotropin. So, ito naman, it also helps estrogen and progesterone to prepare the breasts for lactation. Kaya ang babaeng buntis, unti-unti, nag-e-enlarge ang breast. And third is the hormone relaxin, from the word relax. Ang hormone na to tumutulong para yung pelvic ligaments at yung symphysis pubis ng mother mag-relax and become more flexible during birth. This will make sure that vaginal delivery will be successful kasi hindi ganon katigas yung pelvic ligaments na dadaanan ng fetus vaginally. That's the end of the endocrine system. Thank you.